Hi, my name is Jones Mays.
Hi, my name is Anai Yaverino, and we are part of the Contemporary Arts Museum Teen Council, and today we have Larry Ossei-Mensah, and we wanted to ask him a few questions about his upcoming exhibition at CAMH. Hi.
Hey, how you guys doing?
I'm doing good.
I'm glad you could be here. You can see part of the process of putting together the exhibition, Amoako Boafo, Soul of Black Folks. It's his first museum solo show. It's actually the second iteration of the show. The first one we did in San Francisco. Now we're bringing it here to CAMH, to Houston, and you're getting to see how the magic comes together.
It looks great.
Yeah,
really.
thank you.
It does.
So my first question is, I wanted to ask you, how were you as a teen, and what were the first artworks or artists that inspired you to get started?
As a teen, I'd say I was gregarious, involved in a lot of activities. Went to an all-boys high school, so I think that really helped me establish a sense of discipline that I've lived with even today as an adult. And did sports, so I did track, I did football. I wasn't that good in football. I wasn't that fast in track, but I just liked the camaraderie that those activities offered. And in terms of art, I grew up in New York City. I'm from the Bronx. So I would say the first art that I was exposed to was graffiti. So just kind of seeing graffiti on the trains, on buildings. I tried my hand at it. I wasn't that good. But you had graffiti, breakdancing, all these kind of forms of expression were kind of the first exposure to art as a vehicle to tell your story. And in terms of like first piece that inspired me, that's a tough one. I think as an adult, I'm really inspired by the work of Yinka Shonibari, who's a Nigerian British artist who makes sculptures, paintings. And I'm really inspired by his story because he, I think, became partially paralyzed when he was like 18 years old. And he didn't use that as an excuse to not try to be the best artist, be the best person he could be. And he's now become like this iconic artist. I'm trying to think who else. Hank Willis Thomas, who's become a friend, incredible artist, photographer, sculptor, activist. Lynette Yadam, incredible painter. British Ghanaian painter. I'm trying to think who else. Yeah, it changes. But I think for me, art was something that, I feel like chose me. It wasn't something that I set out to say I'm gonna be a curator. Because I studied like business in school, so I didn't study art in school. But it was something that I was constantly exposed to. Even actually, one thing going back to the teen years, I interned a lot. So from my junior year of high school all the way through college, I actually interned at different record companies. So this is the late 90s. Every young black man is trying to be Puff Daddy. And I had those aspirations of actually being in the music industry. But after college, I kind of realized that wasn't the path for me. And actually went into advertising for a little bit. And then eventually, began my journey in the arts as a photographer. But then realized that I didn't like being an artist. I like working with artists. And so once I kind of made that pivot, then that's when I kind of went all in terms of curating and collaborating with artists to make exhibitions.
Yeah, so thank you. I really want to talk more about how you jumped into being a curator. I know you talked about how you were first a photographer, so I just want to know how you made that transition.
Well, the first exhibition I did was with my friend Stanley Lumex at this store. It's actually Harriet's Alter Ego. So it was a boutique store in Brooklyn on Flatbush. It wasn't a gallery like most people probably think about it, but it was like a community space. and we curated the exhibition together. And so it really came out of necessity in terms of wanting to put together something that told our story, allowed our photographs to really resonate with our community, with our peers. And then from that, I recognized that there was an opportunity to tell the stories of other artists who looked like me, or other artists who came from similar circumstances and environments like me. And also I was writing about art, and I think that really helped. So I will write for like Uptown Magazine, Essence Magazine, a lot of different cultural magazines. And so, I'm, if you want to quantify like my personality, I'm one that learns by doing. And so for me, writing, putting on shows, realizing that wasn't my vibe, but I like to organize them. I like to work with artists. And, just bit by bit, I worked with Rush Arts, which is an incredible arts organization now based in Philadelphia that really gave me my first opportunity to show in Chelsea. And, it's just been bit by bit. And it's kind of, when you do something you love, it doesn't feel like work. I know that's a cliche, but it's actually a real thing. Because you're so passionate about, in the case of Amoako, telling his story, sharing his work with a multitude of people. That excitement is what drives you, as opposed to like if I had, regular 9 to 5, which I did have. But I've been blessed to find my niche and what I get excited about, and just trying to share it with everybody else.
I really find it interesting what you're saying. I want to ask if you could elaborate a bit more on how you use your identity to show, how you use your identity to drive your exhibits and your shows.
Well, I think in the beginning of my career, particularly like 2009, 10, I saw a lack of platforms that really showcase artists, black and brown artists, AAPI artists, Latinx artists. And so for me, I'm one that, I'm not a complainer, so it's like, how do we fix it? How do we take advantage of the tools and resources that may or may not be available to tell our story, right? Because at the time, it was very, it's funny, I was talking to a friend the other day, and he's like, 10, 15 years ago, you might get one show with like a black artist or African artist or Asian or Latinx or Native American. And now to see that that's multiplying, for me, is really exciting. And so, some of it goes back to, being a teenager and wondering that what would 16, 17-year-old Larry be excited about, because I didn't really go to museums voluntarily when I was a teenager. A lot of it was like school trips, and it'd be like the Museum of Natural History, maybe the Met. And so what can I do to make this experience more accessible to like your age group, your peers, where you're just like, wow, this is dope. I see myself in this work. I love the fashion in this work. All the different elements that kind of factor into shaping who we are as individuals, right? So it's not just about like a cultural identity, but it's also about a psychographic identity. How do we see the world? How do we see each other? How do we see each other as humans? And so it's something that I'm constantly thinking about in terms of like the humanity. Particularly when you think about what happened, unfortunately, in Buffalo, like, how do we remind people of each other's humanity despite these ugly, tragic events that may occur? And how can art be a vehicle to kind of ignite that hope, ignite that curiosity and that possibility, that we all can kind of thrive and be our full selves?
Yeah, so thank you. That was great. I had another question. I was wondering, what kind of advice do you have for people like myself who want to jump into being a curator?
I would say look at a lot of art, look at as much art as you can, and really begin to think about what moves you, what speaks to you. And it doesn't, obviously we're in a museum, so, I obviously seeing museum exhibitions, but also I know Houston has a lot of alternative art spaces, galleries, and really kind of seeing what are the things that kind of stimulate your mind, but also what ignites questions, right? Because for me, a lot of my practice is also thinking about like, what questions can you answer? And then how do you collaborate with artists to kind of, you know, attempt to get an answer? 9 times out of 10, it may generate a new question. And then I think really thinking about and looking at who are artists in your community. Like, are there other teen artists that you know, friends you know who do photography? And just going after it, you know? So like if you have a friend who's a painter and you really believe in what they're doing, put together an exhibition, right? And that could be in a boutique, like what I did. That could be, you know, at somebody's home, in their living room, you know. It doesn't necessarily need to just be a white cube space in order to create a platform for, you know, artists that you believe in to have their work be seen. I think it's really about creating space for dialogue and a conversation, and developing a point of view, right? And I think looking at a lot of art, engaging with artists, you know, reading, doing research, seeing what you're attracted to, writing about art, I think also is important. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's like if you can organize exhibitions, regardless of where it is, I think then you really begin to cultivate like a curatorial voice and a curatorial perspective.
So when you mentioned teens, I got curious as to what is something that you want teens to take away from this exhibit at CAM?
What I want teens to take away from this exhibition is seeing a sense of themselves, right? And seeing the beauty that we all encompass as human beings, and seeing the spectrum of emotion, right? So, you know, you have characters that may be kind of more in a state of rumination. You have characters who are in a state of joy. You have characters who are in a state of asserting, you know, their place in the world. And hopefully that kind of gives them the inspiration to kind of really think about that in terms of who they are. You know, because given like all the other variables that now kind of like inform our lives and how we see ourselves now, like I couldn't imagine being a teenager with like Instagram, you know. And for some people it's like a great tool, but for other people it can be like this detrimental platform that like, you know, coerces you to question who you are. And I think also when you're at that developmental stage, you're trying to understand your identity. You're trying to figure out where do you fit in the world. You're trying to find the things that you enjoy. You're trying to figure out your friend group, right? And I think those are challenging things. They're human things. I mean, for some of us, it's like lifelong questions. And I think, you know, for me, this exhibition is about spending time, right, with these works, right, and really seeing what a painting can do when you're attempting to capture the essence of an individual, right, because these are all based on people. And beginning to think about, you know, because it's in the title, like Soul of Black Folks, right, which is based on a book written by W.E.B. Du Bois in 1903. And it was this ethnographic assessment of black life at the time. And when I began to, you know, see Amaako's work and get to know him, I felt like he was trying to, in his own way, give us a sense of what life was like as a black artist for black folks in 2022. But the beauty of his work is that whether you're black, Asian, Latinx, Native American, queer, straight, LGBTQI, there is something in this show where you'll see yourself. Like, you know, we open the show with this piece, Reflections 1, right? Because he had to deal with the same thing as well when he was a student studying in Vienna, where he was questioning his identity. He was questioning, what am I making work with? And he did a series of these self-portraits of himself nude. And that's kind of the most vulnerable place you could be as a human, right? And the fact that he felt it was important to put this down on canvas and paper for the world to see and also know that they're not alone, right? Because I think often in life we go through kind of these ups and downs and think that, you know, it's just you. But the reality is that many of us are going through this. So then how does this exhibition function as an invitation to think about the range of emotions and scenarios that we deal with as human beings, and then stimulate a conversation that hopefully will help folks feel more affirmed in who they are, feel more confident in who they are, and have excitement for life, you know? Because it's not easy, but I think art for me is a catalyst that is like a nice reminder that life is great regardless of what's happening. And I'm excited to share that, you know, with the teens and with the rest of the Houston community.
Yeah, so thank you. So I was wondering, I want to go back to the phrase you said, when you look at artwork, what question is it trying to answer? So what question is this exhibit trying to answer for you?
I think it's a question about Black joy, subjectivity, presence. There's a sense of freedom that these figures evoke, and how do we respond to that? You know, how can we ensure that we're living with that same level of presence, right? Because I think society kind of conditions us to shrink ourselves, right? And just fit in, you know? But what does it look like to really kind of think about who you are as an individual and really embrace self, right? And I think also, like, it's very much a show about painting, right? It's something that he loves to do. It's one of the oldest kind of artistic art forms. And so what does that look like through the lens of an artist who was born in Ghana? And then also just kind of the act of painting, right? So if you look at these paintings, the skin for all the figures he paints with his fingers, right? So there's something very tactile, immediate, and almost sculptural in the construction of these figures. But then you have these moments that are kind of like gestures towards abstraction, just in terms of like how her bag, you know it's a bag, but it's not like this kind of photo-realistic rendering of the bag. So I think also inviting people to really use their imagination. So like with this lamp, he purposely doesn't paint the lamp because he wants you to use your imagination to fill in what that lamp could be, because maybe for you it could be blue, for you it could be red, you know? And these works really don't have the oomph without the engagement of the viewer, right? And bringing your experiences, bringing your perspective to this exhibition. And then, lastly, I think it's the first time that he's seen a lot of these works, and the public will see a lot of these works in one place. So we have works from as far back as 2016, which, in the age of COVID feels like dog years, to present. And so to also see how an artist progresses in their practice, right? And I think reminding everyone that, although he's become, this superstar artist, it took time and it was a process. And anything that is worth having in life is a process. And I think if you're willing to kind of go through that process and put in the hard work, you will yield positive results.
So talking about process, what would you describe your process and journey of becoming a curator in one word?
That's a very good question. How would I describe my process and journey towards curating? I would say curiosity. I've always, because people ask me, how do you put together a show? Or how do you find an artist? There's no formula, It's guided by what I'm curious about in that moment. And through that curiosity, trying to be responsive to what's happening in our world. So I'm not necessarily a curator who's going to be looking at, 19th century painting and making an exhibition about that. It's very much about the contemporary. It's very much about the now. I do look at the past for insights to see where we could connect dots and their connective tissues and kind of repetition of behaviors. But it's very much about this question, whatever the question may be, whether it's about what does it mean to be liberated as an individual, right? And what does that look like? What does it mean to be free, not just physically free, but psychologically free, for example? So always just been guided by my curiosity, and that hasn't failed me yet.
So I think our final question is, what would you like the viewer or the person coming to view this exhibit, what would you like them to take away?
I want them to be reminded of the importance of humanity. Yes, all the figures here are Black folks of African descent. So obviously foundationally reminding people that Black folks have a range of emotion, expression, articulation, fashion, but see themselves in these works, regardless of your background. But I think also, again, it's very much about painting. It's very much about beauty. It's very much about storytelling. And I want people to really kind of be excited about that. And, if you're an artist, hopefully be inspired to want to go in your studio and make whatever it is you make. If you're a curator, wow, how can I put something together that makes me feel how I feel, Because one thing that I've learned in all the years that I've been curating is that it's not necessarily about curating a good or a bad show, because it's always going to be subjective. There are going to be people who love this painting and people who aren't as responsive to it. And I think if you try to play that game, you'll always fail. But I think if you can create a holistic experience where people are moved, whether it's moved to joy, moved to anger, moved towards curiosity, moved towards rumination, then I feel like I've done my job, right? Because, art is, for me, it has this catalytic capacity. And, my hope is that everybody who comes to see the show, they come with an open mind, open heart, and they're moved in some way, and inspired in some way, to then go out and make a difference in our world.
It was such a pleasure talking to you, and thank you so much for all of the insight.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Bring your friends to see the show.
You will.